Are you confused about why cars and trucks cost so much? Are you frustrated by all the defects and recalls for cars? And are you enraged by the long repair times and lack of parts? Well, stay tuned because we're going to tell you who created this sad litany of events next. Hello, and welcome to the Chaplain's Corner After Hours, a place to discuss stories the mainstream media ignores that can actually impact our Christian walk and our spiritual journey. Chaplain Warren and Chaplain Nan are your hosts, and we're glad to have you with us. Hello, and welcome back to the Chaplain's Corner After Hours. I'm Chaplain Warren.
And I'm Chaplain Nan.
And in our last two episodes, we've been talking about violence against the church and how this violence is being perpetrated by leftist, progressive activists to advance their ideologies. Well, today we're going to really change courses, and we're going to talk about a different kind of violence against the church, our country, and specifically the people of our country and the people of the church. And so this story starts back in 2009 because under President Obama in 2009, the EPA issued a landmark scientific determination known as the Endangerment Finding. And this finding formally stated that 6 greenhouse gases, including carbon dioxide and methane, threaten the public health and welfare of current and future generations. This finding provided the legal foundation for the federal government to regulate greenhouse gases under the Clean Air Act, leading to the Clean Power Plan and vehicle fuel economy standards which followed along with that. The translation of all that government gobbledygook is unelected bureaucrats could dictate what you could or could not buy in several major sectors of the economy. And these included vehicles, appliances, residential HVAC systems, and your lighting, and even your electricity, natural gas, wood, and even your toilet. This included all the things that we take for granted almost in everyday life. And so, why is all of this relevant to the church and to the people of the church? Well, it's all relevant because at its bottom, it's a Romans chapter 13 issue. And so you might ask, what do I mean by that? Well, Romans chapter 13, verses 1 through 7, instructs Christians to submit to governing authorities, stating that all authority is instituted by God to maintain order and to punish wrongdoing. But nothing in Romans chapter 13 instructs us to give blind submission to government. Government is intended by God to keep the peace, to allow for a proper ordering of society in a biblical manner. And so when the government seeks to dominate us or oppress us or push man's demands on us, it in effect has strayed from God's design. And we have a duty to resist by the least activist means possible, which turn things back to God.
So could you maybe give some examples of how you resist, but you're still obeying God's law of Romans 13?
Well, there's several ways you could resist, and in fact, I think many people have been resisting by the mere decision not to buy new cars, not to buy new refrigerators, not to buy new washing machines. Unfortunately, we've probably all had to buy new toilets, but there's just some things you can't totally avoid. But certainly, not playing the game is one way to resist. Another way to resist is to elect those officials to government posts who will use their legislative powers to turn back the types of issues that we've been dealing with through the EPA and other agencies. And I think in the 2024 election, we that's what we saw. And so in essence, President Trump gave a mandate to his pick for the EPA director and the Department of Transportation to turn these regulations back and to overturn them and to return us back to the pre-2009 endangerment finding, so that automakers, appliance makers, you just go down the list, could return to making products that people want versus products that meet unelected bureaucratic demands.
Okay.
So you let's see. So kind of continuing on with this, you might be asking, what's the problem here for the people of the church in particular? Well, the EPA and the Department of Transportation, DOT, used their newly gained legal authority to demand fewer CO2 or carbon dioxide emissions and even greater fuel mileage from vehicles. Now you might ask, well, what's wrong with that? In theory, there's nothing wrong with that. It can be a good thing if there's a tangible benefit for the people who are being governed. But it's a severe problem, and it's oppressive when vehicle reliability, longevity, and repairability are destroyed, and vehicle prices more than double because of all the technology required, and in many cases fairly untested technology, are required to meet the government goals, not customer goals, but unelected bureaucratic government controls. And the most perverse aspect of these regulations is that they actually drive up the use of fuel.
Oh,
let me say that again. They actually increase the amount of fuel that is being used in vehicles.
Wow.
And so a person might ask, well, Chaplain Warren, how is that possible? If the regulations are demanding better fuel mileage, how could the vehicles be using more fuel? Well, the answer is it takes an unelected bureaucrat to get us into that situation. And the way the unelected bureaucrats at the EPA did that was based on a regulation scheme called the Footprint-Based Greenhouse Gas Emissions Standards. Now, what does that mess of words mean? What it means is they developed a set of rules that would look at the size of a vehicle, specifically its footprint, how much area of roadway it took up, as well as its weight, and they calculated what they thought the fuel mileage of that vehicle should be. Okay, doesn't sound bad so far. But what happened is, because of their assumptions, little bitty vehicles like compact cars, compact pickup trucks, vehicles of that sort, had such a high bar of required fuel mileage that it's just not technically possible to reach those fuel mileage standards. And so if automakers tried to make vehicles of that size and they couldn't meet the high bar of fuel mileage, then they would owe the government massive penalties for each vehicle that didn't meet the bar. Now, on the other side of the equations, it turns out that the bigger footprint vehicles, the really big vehicles, the fuel mileage was actually abysmally low. Very easy to meet that with the current technology. And so what did automakers do? They quit making the compact cars, the compact trucks, and they make these huge pickup trucks and huge SUVs because they can easily meet the fuel mileage standards for those sized vehicles, and they don't have to pay any penalties to the government. But in the real world, all those huge trucks, all those huge SUVs burn a lot more fuel than the compact vehicles do.
So what they figured out, let me just make sure I got this straight. So what some person who's in an office that we don't know about and made basically a law for us that we, or a rule that's so poisonous with the consequence if you don't follow it, by calculating that to make a certain size vehicle, you have to have all these things in the vehicle. And in order to save the environment. But what they miscalculated, they must have been like me in remedial math and science, because how can you come up with, I figured out that a small car which is just going to produce smaller amounts of anything, is more dangerous
to the environment
than the big ASS truck that a lot of folks drive, or the big SUVs that take up 2 tons of space for one person because they're probably easier to buy.
Well, they.
I mean. Anyhow, but that big car and truck actually takes up less than the little one does, and so that one was safe with the rules, stayed within the rules. I want to know who hired the person who made that rule, because that person hired a remedial math student to calculate that. That would be like hiring me to figure out that. So now we have these big, huge cars and trucks that take up 2,000 tons of space and are very hard for parents to get their kids in and out of the cars. Then a smaller car that's a lot cheaper to drive, cheaper to buy, supposedly was, and cheaper to fill up with gas.
Right.
Or power with your battery plug-in next to your blow dryer. I'm being funny. That, it's like somebody hired an F student to figure out that, and all the way up the ranks, nobody figured that out.
So
unless it was on purpose to sell the big vehicles here in the United States to make a lot of money for the gas companies. Could that be a grift?
Well, it might be. The automakers didn't really complain about this because their profit margins are bigger on the bigger vehicles.
And you're making my point for me. So could it be that the person who made the rule somehow was friendly with the auto companies or whoever passed the rules and enforced the rules in order for the car companies to make a whole load full of money?
Well, here's the thing, though. Yes, the profit margins per vehicle are higher, but when you have pickup trucks that cost $75,000, $100,000, $125,000, there's not a whole lot of people relative to the population of the country that can afford to buy those or even to finance them. Versus if the pickup trucks were, say, $25,000, $30,000, $35,000, then you would have the profit margin per vehicle would be less, but you might sell 10 times as many vehicles because 10 times as many people could afford them. And so at the end of the day, you would actually make more money as an auto company.
Okay, so the auto company person, the gas company person, and the government person, all three of those employees, because they were all employees, who decided to band together to come up with this brainiac idea were all at my grade level, which is remedial. Unbelievable.
And so, I mean, I don't disagree with you. But this is what happens. This is what happens when unelected bureaucrats have the power to determine what products are going to be like and what your options are going to be to buy products. Because those products then are no longer designed to meet customer needs and to provide a good value through the competitive marketplace. Those products are designed to meet bureaucratic regulations, and the customers lose every which way.
Right, because, I mean, I would imagine that the bureaucrat is working on an agenda, a political agenda, to accomplish either left or right or center or whatever, or some woke or non-woke agenda, but they're working on an agenda which, no matter which way you look at it, is to enforce things, make things so that you must obey or you pay. Mm-hmm. And being a capitalist country, the capitalist companies don't want to pay. So it's like hand in glove to make sure that we're going to, as they say on Star Trek, for you Trekkies, in the Borg, you'll be assimilated. You will assimilate, which is very communist.
Okay.
A communist in its thought. But anyhow, so if somebody is a bureaucrat who's a real climate, loving, nothing wrong, God made the environment, so you want it to be nice and pristine, but who's like on the extreme side of things, they don't care what happens to a company or care how hard it is for the consumer to purchase something.
Correct.
Or to keep it or to use it or to even be able to purchase it. They don't care about that. They care about the agenda.
The ideology, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So just as a tangible example, I used to have a 1984 Nissan compact pickup, and that pickup truck got better gas mileage than the big monster trucks that are rolling down the highway today. But Nissan can't make my pickup truck today because they have no hope of meeting the fuel mileage requirement that little footprint truck would have. And they can't afford the penalties they'd have to pay to the federal government because it didn't meet that, even though the darn thing got better gas mileage than the things rolling down the road today. It's just wacko. And so anyway, the good news is we the people elected Donald Trump. We were resisting. That's one of the ways you resist. We elected Donald Trump. And so his head of EPA has rescinded this endangerment finding, and all those regulations are now in the toilet, and now automakers can start to work on making cars that people can afford, that meet customer needs, and that reflect, and at prices that reflect the true value of those vehicles. So another example of where that, so not an example, but now that those regulations have been rolled back and the automakers have kind of been unshackled, it'll be interesting to see if they actually start to make vehicles that people want. And so just to kind of look at history, let's go back and think about when Volkswagen introduced the original VW Beetle to the U.S. market in the late 1950s. It absolutely changed vehicle manufacturing for the next 50 years or so. I mean, it totally revolutionized things. And so it'll be really interesting as the government goes back to being a servant of the people instead of being a dictator to the people. It'll be interesting to see if the automakers will respond and get their business instincts back about serving customers and make vehicles that people want. So hoping that happens, a question for anybody who's listening is what kind of vehicle would you like the automakers to make? Tell us in the comments section. We'd like to hear, and maybe if enough of us tell them what we want, maybe they'll actually listen.
Listen, that's the key word.
That's exactly
listen and
right.
do. So just a little sidebar to anybody listening who might get all up in arms about the VW Beetle's origins. We're not going there today. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the manufacture of an economy car, which got great mileage and totally revolutionized what we today know as a car that lasts for a long time, that gets you far on very little gas, so you can keep that money in your pocket and give it to your children.
Exactly. So I hope what we've talked about today about the EPA and these mandates and the rollback and what it might mean for us, I hope that's been helpful. And there are a lot of other regulatory areas where this same type of thing can happen. And so we're going to keep watching to see what does happen. And as these things change, we'll bring those to you and report on them. And so you got another comment?
Yes, I just want to encourage our listeners, Google, look up, ask ChatGPT, whatever you use on your phone or your iPad or your computer, or if you're old-timey, go to the library and ask the reference librarian, who is the head of the EPA? I'm not going to tell you who it is, so you'll have something to do that's interesting. And check him out. If you think the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, is what we call high energy, this guy is on steroids high energy and incredibly, incredibly smart and very devoted to making it a livable, free country, free being the key word.
Amen. And until then, till our next episode, be blessed. Thank you for being with us today. Just remember, God is in control, and we know how the story ends.